So, welcome. Today, I'm Professor Robert Williams. I'm a professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences here at the University of Lethbridge. And I'm going to be talking about two programs that our faculty is involved in, the Masters of Science in Health Science and the PhD in Population Health. Following these overviews, a colleague of mine, Dr. Monique Sedgwick, will be talking about the Masters of Nursing program. So let's just get right into it. Our oldest program, actually, in the Faculty of Health Sciences is this Masters of Science. Now, it's been around since 2004. The original interest in it and purpose was that we had a lot of people in the healthcare sector who were looking for graduate level education. And essentially, that's why this program was created, to provide master's level training, largely in research, to healthcare professionals. As well as, at that time, we had a nursing program, we had an addictions counseling program, and some of the graduates of those programs were looking for graduate level opportunities. So that was the impetus for the original creation of the program. It's evolved somewhat since that original time. Currently, we have three majors. So you can do a master's in the Faculty of Health Sciences, but then you declare a major in one of three areas, either health sciences broadly, nursing, or addictions counseling. And that's largely reflective of, our inaugural programs. Now, since that time, we've added new programs to health sciences, so public health, therapeutic recreation, Aboriginal health. So it's quite possible that in the future we may add those as additional majors. There's equal thought, however, that because all of these majors still encompass the same four basic courses, and that all of them are still in the general purview of health sciences, we could collapse it to a single major, which is just health science. Still debating that. So who should be interested and who would this program be appropriate for? Essentially, I would say it's people who desire graduate level training in research, and or people who eventually wish to pursue a PhD in a health-related discipline, and or simply aspire to be health science researchers. To be clear, this really is a research type program. The courses are all about quantitative statistics, qualitative statistics, research methods, philosophy of inquiry. So it's a research intensive type of program. If you're looking for a more clinically oriented degree, you're actually better off in the Health Sciences Masters of Nursing program or the Faculty of Education's Master of Counseling program. But if you have an interest in research in the general area of health sciences, then this would be a very appropriate program for you. So there's four required courses in the first year: research methods, philosophy of inquiry, advanced statistics, and advanced qualitative methodology. We pride ourselves in the fact that a lot of programs tend to be oriented either qualitatively or quantitatively. The truth of the matter is both of these are legitimate and important research methodologies, and the best researchers are always going to be people familiar and fluent in both. And so we have experts in both of these areas teaching each of those, as well as philosophy of inquiry, a more general course about the nature of scientific research, and research methods looking at the various specific methodologies within both qualitative and quantitative inquiry that you could potentially use. Doesn't preclude a student from taking a couple of extra courses if they want to. That's not unusual, especially if you want a more content specific course, like regardless of the fact that you may be aspiring to be researchers, you may have a particular interest in addiction. And so taking an additional course on substance abuse or eating disorders, something like that, is not unusual to give you more of that content you might be looking for. A thesis is required, which is the focus of the second year. All those 4 courses are taken in the first year. The thesis topic and the discipline of the thesis supervisor are the primary determinants of whether your major is declared in health science, nursing, or addictions. On average, it's taken people about 2 years to complete the program. The thesis format, we're gravitating more towards a thesis by publication. That's a more international trend as well. It doesn't mean you can't do the traditional thesis. It's fairly inefficient, especially for someone who wants to be a researcher and potentially publish their research. That the earlier you get training at that, the better. And so trying to create some publishable documents out of your master's thesis is a very efficient jumpstart to being a researcher. So we encourage that, but it doesn't preclude you using the traditional route. Now, they don't have to be published papers. They have to be publishable. They have to be deemed by your committee to be good enough that they could be, and probably should be, submitted to academic journals for adjudication and potential publication. The number of papers varies depending on your committee, but what I've seen is it's generally 2, sometimes 1, sometimes 3. We currently have about 25 students enrolled. We, in the last few years, have accepted between 4 and 10 students per year. And these are our main students historically. U of L undergraduates, Southern Alberta healthcare employees, foreign students. We've always had a fair number of foreign students. And Canadian students interested in a relatively unique expertise. We have a couple of unique programs, Aboriginal health being one of them, complementary medicine being another, addictions counseling being fairly novel at the undergraduate level in Canada, and therapeutic recreation. So these specialties also attract people coming to our program. There's only 1 application date. The reason for that was we try to establish a cohort. When you only get like 4, 6, 7 students, we want to try and create a bit of a research culture. So that's why we like everyone to start at the same time so they get to know each other, potentially work with each other. If at some point we have a larger number of intakes, one of the historical bottlenecks has been having sufficient people to supervise students. It's quite possible we now actually have 20 eligible faculty to supervise students, and so our capacity for supervision has gone up. If our applications and acceptance numbers go up, we may also be interested in having more than 1 start date. But right now, and for the last several years, it's just been February 1st application date for a September start. One of the main requirements is finding one of the health science faculty interested and able to supervise you. So if you have some interest, you should start looking at the faculty website and seeing what sort of research interests the various faculty have. And we're all over the map there. I mean, a good supervisor-graduate-student relationship is where there's some intersection between your interests and a faculty member's interests. It's not that useful having a faculty member supervising something or a topic they're not that familiar with, because their ability to really identify what you should be doing or making it a publishable standard is more compromised. Similarly, it's not really in your best interest to simply do a project that your supervisor already has lined up, unless it's a natural interest and passion of yours. What I do with my prospective students is I have a list of 20 different topics, general topics, I'd be willing to supervise a student in, but your thesis has to fall in one of those topics. Doesn't really matter to me which one, but there has to be that sort of intersection. So that's generally how it works. but it doesn't have to. Like, you may have a really interesting topic that your prospective supervisor is interested in becoming familiar with. Similarly, you may already have followed this person in their research endeavors and really just want to, go with the flow and, get on that train with some projects that are already been sort of outlined to some degree by the supervisor. English fluency, 3 letters of reference, and GPA of 3.0 in the last 20 courses. But by far and away, the most important thing is having someone lined up to supervise you. We offer part-time or full-time, but it is on campus only. You have to physically take those 4 graduate courses on campus. Funding, we actually have pretty generous funding. So the MST Program Committee awards the following from its monetary allocation for graduate studies. So $7,000 for a graduate assistantship. Now that's tied to you being a TA or doing some sort of work for some sort of faculty member, marking or something of that nature. A domestic tuition award, an international tuition award if you're an international student, and the Dean's Scholarship. Rob Wood, the Dean of Graduate Studies, is in the audience. He's the one who makes that determination. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but it's largely academic merit that is the driver there.
It's a combination of academic merit and also demonstrated research potential or productivity.
Okay. Okay. So potentially up to $23,000 a year for domestic students and $30,000 a year for international students, which is very good. You compare this to other universities. We're pretty well funded. So I got a few minutes for questions before we go to the PhD program, or you can hold off on your questions after I finish the PhD description. Any questions? No. Anything online there? Got it? No? Okay. So the other program I want to quickly talk about is our Doctor of Philosophy in Population Studies and Health. This is a program jointly run by the Faculties of Arts and Sciences and the Faculty of Health Sciences. This was launched in 2016, and the purpose was to provide doctoral level training in a more social and health science related discipline at the University of Lethbridge. We have 6 concentrations: diversity, disparities, inequalities, and social determinants of health, or global population health, or life course aging and health, or policies, policy analysis and population health, or population health and demographic change, or sustainability and population health. Now those, as you see, those are pretty broad descriptors, and so you can fit a lot of things within those parameters. There's no prescribed courses. It is typical, however, for students to take a couple of courses, and that can range from 1 to 6. It sort of depends on your interest as it intersects with the recommendations of your PhD committee. There is a comprehensive examination required within the first 2 years, and that takes different formats depending on the faculty, but generally it's intended to be a written and oral component to establish the student's general knowledge of their field. A thesis is the central feature of your PhD. I don't know that we've had enough graduates to establish what the average completion time is, but the expected completion time would be, as it is for other PhDs, 4 years. Similarly, the traditional PhD thesis or a set of publishable papers, generally the number of papers is going to be higher, usually 3 or more. And increasingly, especially at PhD level, it's increasingly common to see published papers as opposed to publishable papers. And so you might have 2 published papers in the 3 or 4 that comprise your PhD thesis. Now, the great advantage to that is that if you've already had the international community of scholars independently adjudicate your work and deem it of a quality sufficient for publication, it's harder for your committee to say your thesis isn't any good. So it's actually a smart move from a lot of different, for a lot of different reasons. Now, 3 application dates. We're trying to encourage people into this program because it's a fairly new program. We've created a niche here. We want to expand the number of students in it. So 3 application dates for 3 potential start dates. You do have to have a master's degree in a related discipline, discipline related to population health in some way, with a minimum GPA of 3.0 in the last 20 courses. Here again, the critical thing is having someone in either the Faculty of Health Sciences or Arts and Sciences willing to supervise you. And again, usually that's because you've proposed a topic that has some interest to them, and they've, it's less common for a faculty member to agree to supervise someone without really having understanding what the research endeavor entails. 3 letters of reference, English fluency. This is full-time only and on campus only. We have the same funding available, the graduate assistantship, domestic tuition, international tuition, and dean scholarship. So potentially up to $23,000 a year for domestic and $30,000 a year for international students. So I mean, I think this really makes us competitive compared to several other universities. And that's all I got. So any questions about either the master's in health science or the PhD in population health? Yeah.
Just for the master's in health side, do you necessarily need to have a Bachelor of Science degree to go into that program like you do for many other science master's courses, or could you have a BA in a kind of related field?
A BA in a related field. I mean, a BA in English would be problematic, but a BA in psychology, potentially sociology, BN in nursing, because it is health science, something, a BA in biology, can you get a BA in biology? Probably not. But it's a BSc is not critical. What's critical is that the subject area has some relationship to health. Yeah.
With the master's, your 3 letters, do you need one to be academic?
I believe all
It can be, 2 of the 3 have to be academic, so you can have 1 non-academic. Normally, all 3 are, but it has to be
Yeah, I know that's caused some difficulties in the past, especially for healthcare professionals, been out of school for a while. So I know we've had people who didn't have 2 out of 3. So I think we're a little bit flexible in that way. Yeah, so, yeah. The letters of recommendation aren't the critical thing. It's more your GPA, the fact you've got a topic of interest to the person. So if you can, the more academic references, the better, but certainly 1 I would think would be. No, not necessarily. They simply have to be from employed in an academic setting who could speak to your academic potential. Either, it's obviously better if they've taught you before. Yeah. But again, we've been pretty flexible for letters because of the historic background. of a lot of our applicants.
Sorry, it's February 1st for September 2018 start, is the deadline?
Correct. Okay. Take it away, Mike.
Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Sedgwick, and I'm here to talk about the Master of Nursing program that we have here at the U of L. Let me just give you a little bit of a history of how this program came along, because Dr. Williams has talked about an MSc with a major in nursing. So why in the heck, why would we have a Master of Nursing program? What happened was, based on anecdotal feedback from previous graduates, from our employers, our clinical placement partners, through a survey, they indicated that a Master's of Nursing program would meet healthcare needs within this region. And so from that community survey, that Windshield survey, and in discussion with faculty, it was determined that perhaps rather than having an MSc, brackets nursing, an MN, which is a credential that is more easily and readily recognizable, would be a good course of action. So we developed a proposal and sent it off to the government, and it was approved in 2014, and so we started this program with a fall start in 2015. So it's just a baby program, but I think that we're doing really well. And so it's really a very exciting program for faculty and hopefully for our students as well. So as I've said, it was in response to a community survey, as well as the shortage of nursing personnel educated at the graduate level in southern Alberta. So the purpose is to prepare nurses with advanced knowledge and skills to practice in a variety of different settings at the leadership, in the leadership role, and to contribute to the development of nursing knowledge, and certainly to enhance the health of the people that we serve. It's a unique program. There are many MM programs in the country, and certainly one thing that we needed to do was to distinguish ourselves a little wee bit from other MM programs. And so we decided to offer this using a unique approach. So we use what's called a blended program. So it means that there's a component of online learning plus face-to-face instructional delivery. So what happens is that our students spend probably about 80% of their time online in discussion with their colleagues and with faculty members that are teaching the courses. And then they come to the university for 2 sessions, one at the beginning of the term and the course, and then about 3/4 of the way through, where they meet again with their cohort and with the faculty teaching the course. So that's a very unique kind of approach, rather than fully online or fully in person. I should say that part of the reason as well why we went to the blended format is, again, from that survey, nurses are busy people, not saying that other people aren't busy people, but nurses are busy people and generally tend to have lots and lots of commitment outside of their learning role. And so we thought that this would meet their needs more easily and have a more accessible program to them. We also have 2 kinds of routes. Students can either be full-time or part-time. The full-time we anticipate will take 2 years. The part-time will, we anticipate, take 4 years. Students can also select either project or thesis. So while the MSc is a research-focused master's, we do have the potential for students to select a more clinical approach, and that would be completing a project as the culminating activity for their degree. Now, we didn't want to close the door on advancing nursing knowledge, and so therefore we do offer the option for students to complete a thesis should they wish. Currently, our students, it's pretty much a 50-50 split. About 50% of the students have identified a project and the others a thesis. So that's really exciting, again, for faculty and for our profession. Our current students, we currently have 21 students in the program. 7 are full-time students and 14 are part-time. Again, the students that we attract are nurses. They generally tend to work full-time, and therefore studying part-time is an approach that seems to be reasonable for them. And so that's why we have a little bit of a difference in terms of numbers with full-time or part-time. Because it is a blended format, we have students from across Alberta, BC, and just recently we have 2 students from the Northwest Territories, so that's really exciting. They bring a very different kind of perspective to the discussion, and it's very, very exciting for all of us to have these students. The students who apply must be registered nurses in a jurisdiction in Canada. We do not accept internationally prepared nurses. They must be registered in Canada. So we anticipate we might get some students from right across Canada, but we, at this stage of the game, do not have international students. They practice in a variety of practice settings, from managerial to being at the bedside on a medical surgical to community nursing. They've got a wide variety of practice settings and experiences. We have students from being a novice. We currently have one student who wrote her NCLEX in June and is in the master's program right now. So very much novice, to nurses who have been practicing for over 30 years. And again, that broad variety just brings a real depth and richness to our discussion, so that's exciting. And our graduates come from a variety of undergraduate programs as we attract people from across different provinces and territories. The application process, our deadline is February 1st as well. We only have one intake. We generally have been admitting between 9 and 11 students per cohort. Right now we do have a small program and a small number of faculty, so that's why we only have the one intake and start date. Perhaps as we grow that might change. You have to have a minimum GPA of 3.0 from an undergraduate nursing program. You must be a registered nurse, as I said, in a Canadian jurisdiction. You need 3 letters of reference. Again, typically those references tend to be academic references, although we have seen some people coming in with some references from their workplace. And you must meet the English language proficiency, as I stumble over those words. Funding, as Dr. Williams indicated, we have the same kind of funding, and so our students really have the potential to be very, very well funded. Any questions? Yes?
What would be the advantage of doing like a project compared to the thesis?
So the question is, what would be the advantage of doing a thesis over a project? There really is no advantage one over the other. It really depends the state of the literature, where it's at and where your interest lies. So if there's a huge gap in the literature, then perhaps a thesis where you're going to conduct a research study to try to fill that void, that would be appropriate. But if you're asking a question, well, we do this particular kind of intervention where I work, and is it effective, then a project would be more appropriate. But it depends where the state of the literature is at. Yep. Sure, another question.
Sorry, if I say I do my master's program and then I wanted, say I did the project, would I be able to do my PhD from the project, or would I only need a thesis?
Okay, so the question is, if doing a project at thesis would allow you to enter into a PhD program. Yes, it would. Now, what would happen is that perhaps, depending on where you're completing your PhD, they may ask you to take 1 or 2 additional research courses that deal with particular methodology or something along those lines, but it would not preclude you from applying and getting into a PhD program. Are there any questions from, no? Already?
Then my other question,
Mhm.
just was, now would it be all year round, or would it be just like how an undergraduate degree is done, where it's like the 2 semesters get the summer off?
Okay, so the question is, does the program run throughout the year? It really depends on whether or not you're part-time or full-time and where you're at in your program. So for example, the part-time students usually only carry 1 course per term. And all of our students have to do a clinical experience. Now, that's not like your undergraduate, where you're there to learn particular skills and the psychomotor skills and those sorts of things. It's more learning about the leadership roles and that kind of thing. So that particular course is scheduled in the summer. But as a part-time student, because we have a small faculty and we only offer courses at particular points in the year, you may have a bit of a gap. And if you have a gap, then what we do is we place you in a placeholder course because you need to have continuous registration. So it really depends, part-time, full-time, where you're at in your program.
We just have one question from online here. Are there any plans to include a nurse practitioner stream in the future?
Oh boy, are there any plans to include a nurse practitioner stream? Right now, because this is such a young program, no, we don't have plans yet to look at that. To have a nurse practitioner program, you really do have to have faculty with that designation and make sure that we are able to provide the number of hours, clinical practice hours, to meet that designation. And for right now, we're not going to be going down that route. We want to solidify what we offer right now. No other further questions? Well, thank you very much.